Hello, this is my assignment 2 milestone submission for game development. Today I'll be showing you the progress I've made on my 2D platformer so far. So in this short phase of development, I followed a tutorial on YouTube to get the core systems running, but I have used my own visuals and character sprites with assets online. I got the character assets from this Unity store, and I've got a different tile set from a space station tile set from H.io. So let's start with the uh quick demo of the gameplay I've implemented so far. Okay, so as you can see, I've built a small playground with the assets I've imported from online, and I can move the player around using A and D for left and right movement, and I can press space to jump. I can only jump when this character is planted on the floor, as I'm spamming the spacebar as I jump. You can see I cannot keep on flying and flying. So I this is the result of collision detection working perfectly with the ground. So right now the focus has been getting the physics and the collisions and basically all of these basic platformer stuff correct first before I implement the unique features. So let's look at how these are built in the Unity inspector. Okay, so one of the main mechanics I've implemented so far is the map. The map, yeah, the foreground and background. So for the physical platform that the player interact with, I've used the Tile Map Collider 2D. This is the collider that interacts with the player's collider that enables the player to move around without falling through the floor. And for the background, it's just a basic tile map renderer that is used for visuals and depth, like the station walls and the pipes. So to make this render perfectly, like without any mix-ups, I changed the orders in the tilemap renderer. As you can see in the background here, the order in the layer is 0, while the foreground is 10. So this has a higher value, which means it renders first. And as for the player, it has a value of 20, so it renders even before the foreground renders. So for the player, I've used rigid body 2D to enable physics. As you can see, when I jump, it will fall down naturally, and it simulates gravity pretty well. So and I've used the box collider 2D to make sure that it interacts with the foreground perfectly fine. So an interesting thing is using constraints in the rigid body 2D. I can freeze the rotation on the z-axis to prevent the character from falling and doing weird stuff. So I'll show you when I disable this z-axis rotation. So when I enable this, the character will fall in different weird ways like this. They will tumble around the floor, and yeah, I basically use rigid body and freeze the Z rotation so that the sprite moves as it should in a platformer game. So for the player movement code for jumping and the ground, like not allowing the player to fly around by spamming jump button. When I go to the scripts here, I can look at the player script. So first and foremost, I want to highlight that I've called a float of move speed and jump power, and I've used the old Unity input handling system to code, and it is much simpler, and it's what I followed in the YouTube tutorial. So this system uses like a horizontal axis movement system. So basically, when you press A, it basically gives you an input of -1, which tells the system to move it to the left. And when you press D, it gives you a value of 1, which tells the system to move it to the right. And when there's no input at all, it has a value of 0, which means the system just has lets it stay still with no movement. So along with that, I calculated the move speed, so that it scales with the float that I called above. So for jumping, it's pretty simple. It's just when it presses space, and I'll get to the grounded thing later. So when you press space, you just jump based on the float above that I've called. So to explain the most complicated part of this is the ground check and the ground layer. So basically, this is calling out a collision detection system. So this is basically a collision detection system that when the radius of an invisible circle near the player's feet is collides with the floor, it sets up a value of it allows the player to jump basically by checking whether the player is on the ground or not. So you can see in the Unity game scene in the under player, you can see that there's a ground check. It's a small but faint circle that when the player is on the ground, it along with the jump button, when the player is grounded, is a true or false. So when it's true, and when the player presses space, the player sprite jumps. So this is basically it for what I have done so far. To talk about challenges, the biggest challenge I've faced so far is working with like this Unity system while importing something from itch.io, as you can see here. I had trouble taking these sprites from itch.io into the Unity system, as I had to learn how to uh, cut up the different sprites, and then I have to um, scale these sprites with the pixels per unit so that it appears as it does in the game scene, as you can see below. One more thing was also how I had to make a tile map to make sure that I could uh, easily design the background and the foreground. As you can see at the side, there's a tile palette which I could easily select and basically paste onto the game scene. Okay, so looking at my schedule, my next steps are focused on making the character sprites animate in the idle and walk, jump in air, all those animations. And then the next thing is to code the main thing, which is gravity flipping, along with designing maybe 1 to 3 solid levels that the player can play through, and also adding in a human item collection system, which is like a point-based system where it's basically coins, where when the player runs through a space station employee, he gains a point or something. So yeah, that's basically it. I've come to the end of the progress update. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.